What if I told you that your happiness has been hacked? What if the reason you feel like you're constantly chasing contentment, always upgrading your life and, constantly paying for peace of mind that never quite arrives, is because you've been enrolled in a subscription service you never signed up for? Just think about your phone right now. How many apps are quietly draining your bank account every single month? Netflix, Spotify, that meditation app you downloaded during your last breakdown, the productivity tool you swore would change your life. One by one, they seemed harmless, but add them up, and suddenly you're paying hundreds of dollars a month for services you barely even use. Your relationship with happiness works exactly the same way, except instead of charging your credit card, it's charging your soul. And instead of a monthly fee, you're paying with your peace, your presence, your ability to just be satisfied with what is. Right now, you're probably subscribed to at least a dozen happiness services without even realizing it. The Achievement Premium Plan, the Comparison Plus package, the Validation Monthly Membership, the Future Fulfillment Deluxe Edition, and here's the cruel genius of it all. These subscriptions are designed to never fully satisfy you because, satisfied customers don't keep paying. You see, happiness has been turned into a product. And like all products in a capitalist economy, it's designed to create return customers, not satisfied ones. It's designed to solve your problem just enough to keep you hopeful, but not enough to keep you from coming back. But what if I told you there's a way to cancel all your subscriptions? What if there's a way to access happiness that doesn't require monthly payments, constant upgrades, or endless premium features? What if the happiness you've been paying for was always free? This isn't just philosophy, this isn't just motivational speaking. This is about understanding how your mind has been programmed to seek satisfaction in all the wrong places, and how that programming is keeping you trapped in an endless cycle of desire, temporary satisfaction, and renewed dissatisfaction. This is about the subscription model of happiness, and why you're always paying. Let me tell you about Alex. Alex was a premium subscriber to every happiness service available. Alex had the latest iPhone, the perfect apartment, the impressive job title, the curated Instagram feed that made everyone else feel inadequate about their own lives. Alex worked out 6 days a week, read self-help books, attended networking events, and maintained a bullet journal that was basically a work of art. From the outside, Alex had figured it out. Alex had cracked the code of modern living, but every morning Alex woke up with the same feeling in their chest. A tightness, an anxiety, a sense that despite having everything they thought they wanted, something was still missing. Something was still wrong. So Alex would upgrade, new gym membership, better apartment, more prestigious position, fancier car. Each upgrade came with the promise, this will be the thing that finally makes me happy. And for a while, it would work. The new job would provide a hit of satisfaction. The new relationship would fill the void. The new purchase would generate excitement. But then, inevitably, the subscription would expire. The novelty would wear off. The dopamine hit would fade. And Alex would be back to that same familiar feeling, empty, restless, searching. What Alex didn't realize was that they were trapped in what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill, the tendency for humans to quickly return to a baseline level of happiness despite positive or negative events. But it's worse than a treadmill, because at least on a treadmill, you know you're not going anywhere. The subscription model of happiness is more insidious because it promises you that the next payment will finally get you there. The next upgrade will be the one that sticks. The next achievement will be the one that satisfies. Alex's story reached a breaking point on a Tuesday morning in March. Alex was sitting in their expensive car in the parking lot of their dream job, looking at their bank account on their premium phone, and suddenly laughing. Not because anything was funny, but because the absurdity of it all finally hit them. They had everything they thought they wanted, and they felt nothing. That's when Alex started asking a different question. Not what do I need to buy to be happy, but what if happiness isn't for sale? And that question changed everything. Because here's what Alex discovered and what millions of people are discovering. The subscription model of happiness isn't just ineffective, it's designed to be ineffective. It's built on a fundamental misunderstanding of what happiness actually is and how it actually works. And once you see the scam, you can't unsee it. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain when you get caught in the subscription model of happiness. Because understanding the neuroscience makes this whole system much less mysterious and much more defeatable. Your brain has something called the reward prediction system. It's designed to help you survive by motivating you to seek out things that are good for you and avoid things that are harmful. In our ancestral environment, this system worked perfectly. You felt hungry, you found food, you felt satisfied, you felt cold, you found shelter, you felt warm. But here's the problem. That same system is now being hijacked by a culture that has figured out how to trigger your reward pathways without ever fully satisfying them. Dr. Robert Sapolsky, Stanford's renowned neuroscientist, explains it this way. Your brain releases dopamine not when you get what you want, but when you anticipate getting what you want. The neurochemical high happens in the wanting, not the having. Smart marketers figured this out decades ago. They realized that if they could keep you in a state of perpetual anticipation, always expecting that the next purchase, the next achievement, the next upgrade would be the one that finally delivers lasting satisfaction, they could keep you buying forever. Think about how streaming services work. They don't just give you a movie, they give you the promise of unlimited movies. They don't just offer entertainment, they offer the fantasy that somewhere in their catalog is the perfect show that will finally make your evening complete. But here's where it gets really insidious. Research by Dr. Tim Kasser on materialistic values shows that the more we pursue external sources of happiness, money, status, possessions, appearance, the less happy we actually become. And not just temporarily, permanently. It's called the materialistic paradox. The more you subscribe to external sources of validation, the less capable you become of generating internal satisfaction. Why? Because every time you look outside yourself for happiness, you're training your brain that happiness is not something you possess inherently, it's something you have to earn, buy, achieve, or acquire. Ancient wisdom traditions understood this thousands of years ago. The Buddha called it tanha, the thirst that can never be quenched. He recognized that suffering comes not from not having what we want, but from the wanting itself. From the belief that our well-being depends on external circumstances aligning with our preferences. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that happiness comes from wanting what you have, not having what you want. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does." But we've forgotten this wisdom. We've been convinced that happiness is a destination rather than a way of traveling, a thing to be acquired rather than a capacity to be cultivated. Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky's research at UC Riverside reveals something stunning. Only about 10% of your happiness comes from your external circumstances. Your income, your relationship status, your possessions, your achievements, all of it combined accounts for just 1/10 of your overall well-being. 50% comes from genetics, your baseline temperament and natural tendencies. But here's the game changer. 40% comes from intentional activities, from how you choose to think, what you choose to focus on, and how you choose to engage with life. This means that almost half of your happiness is under your direct control. But most of us are spending all our time and energy trying to manipulate that 10% while ignoring the 40% that's actually ours to shape. We're trying to change our lives when we should be changing our minds. Let me walk you through the most popular happiness subscriptions that are probably running in the background of your consciousness right now. See if any of these sound familiar. The Achievement Unlimited Plan. Monthly cost, your present moment awareness, features endless goal setting, constant improvement metrics, future-focused thinking. Promise, happiness is just one more accomplishment away. Reality, each achievement just reveals the next mountain to climb. Sarah was a premium subscriber to this service. Every promotion at work came with a brief high, followed by the immediate question, "What's next?" She couldn't enjoy success because she was already focused on the next level. She was living in a permanent state of not there yet. The Comparison Pro package. The monthly cost? Well, it's your self-worth and inner peace. The features include constant benchmarking against others, seamless social media integration, and automatic inadequacy alerts. The promise is simple: know where you stand relative to everyone else. But the reality, there's always someone out there doing better, having more, or seeming happier. Mike, without even realizing it, was enrolled in this one. Every scroll through social media was a payment, every wedding invitation became a fee, and every time a colleague posted vacation photos, it was another charge to his sense of self-worth. Then there's the Validation Premium membership. The monthly cost for this one is your authentic self-expression. Its features are people-pleasing algorithms, approval-seeking behaviors, and a performance-based identity. The promise says, be loved for who you can become. But the reality is, you never quite feel truly known or accepted for who you actually are. Jessica discovered after some time that she'd been paying this subscription for 20 years. She realized she had no idea what she actually liked or wanted, simply because she'd spent so long being what others needed her to be. And now the Future Fulfillment Deluxe package. The monthly cost here is your ability to be satisfied right now. The features? Well, there's constant planning, worry algorithms, and a whole lot of someday thinking. The promise is happiness is waiting for you in the future. But the reality is the future just keeps moving, and satisfaction keeps getting postponed. David was honestly surprised to learn he'd been auto-enrolled in this service. He was always planning the next vacation while still on vacation, thinking about retirement while missing out on his children's childhood and, in a way, preparing for life instead of actually living it. And here's the most expensive subscription of all, the Control Everything Enterprise Edition. The monthly cost? Well, it's your serenity, your flexibility, and your trust in life. The features include micromanagement tools, anxiety-driven planning, and resistance to uncertainty. The promise? Safety, through total control of circumstances. But the reality is exhaustion, rigidity, and honestly, constant disappointment when life refuses to cooperate. Now here's what's kind of brilliant about these subscriptions. They all contain a grain of truth. Achievement can bring satisfaction. Social connection does matter. Planning is useful. Having some control over your life is, of course, important. But the subscription model takes these natural human needs and turns them into, well, addictions. It takes healthy behaviors and makes them compulsive. It takes normal desires and makes them desperate. And the result? You're constantly paying, but never satisfied. Always upgrading, but never arriving, perpetually investing in happiness while never quite being able to afford it. But here's what nobody tells you. There's a free version of happiness. There always has been. You just sort of forgot how to access it. Think about a time when you were completely absorbed in something you loved. Maybe you were reading a great book, having a deep conversation, playing with a child, creating something beautiful, or simply sitting in nature, feeling connected to the world around you. In that moment, were you thinking about what you didn't have? Were you comparing yourself to others? Were you worried about the future or replaying the past? Of course not. You were simply present, content, whole. That state, that natural, effortless satisfaction. That's the free version. That's what happiness actually is when it's not being sold to you. But we've been conditioned to believe that these moments are just brief intermissions between the real business of life, the pursuing, the achieving, the comparing, the upgrading. Dr. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying what he calls flow states. Those moments when you're so engaged in an activity that self-consciousness disappears, time seems to stop, and you experience what he calls autotelic experience. Activity that is rewarding in and of itself. His research reveals something profound. People report the highest levels of happiness, not when they're consuming or acquiring, but when they're creating, connecting, or completely engaged in meaningful activity. In other words, the free version of happiness comes from being, not having, from engagement, not acquisition, from presence, not pursuit. But the subscription model has trained us to believe that this natural state is somehow inferior to the manufactured highs of achievement, validation, and material success. We've been convinced that contentment is settling, that presence is passive, that being satisfied with what we have means giving up on growth. This is perhaps the greatest lie ever sold, that there's something wrong with being okay right now. Ancient traditions understood the free version intuitively. Zen Buddhism talks about beginner's mind, approaching each moment with fresh awareness, without the burden of endless wanting. Taoism teaches Wu Wei, effortless action that flows from being aligned with natural rhythms rather than constantly fighting against them. The Sufi poet Hafez wrote, "I wish I could show you, when you are lonely or in darkness, the astonishing light of your own being. That light, that inherent okayness, that fundamental aliveness, that's the free version. That's what was never for sale because it was never yours to lose." Let's talk about how this happened. How did happiness become a subscription service? How did contentment become a commodity? How did we end up paying for something that used to be free? It started with a simple discovery. Dissatisfied people make better consumers. In the 1920s, advertisers made a revolutionary breakthrough. Instead of just selling products, they started selling feelings. Instead of promoting what their products did, they started promoting how their products would make you feel. But here's the genius of it. To sell you a feeling, they first had to convince you that you didn't already have that feeling. To sell you confidence, they had to make you feel insecure. To sell you beauty, they had to make you feel ugly. To sell you success, they had to make you feel like a failure. Edward Bernays, often called the father of public relations, wrote, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society." He understood that if you could control people's sense of what they needed to be happy, you could control their behavior. And so began the systematic dismantling of natural contentment. Today, the average person sees over 5,000 advertisements per day, each one carrying the same subtle message. You're not enough as you are, but you could be with our product. You're not happy now, but you could be with our service. You're not complete, but you could be with our solution. These messages don't just sell products, they sell a worldview where happiness is scarce, external, and available for purchase, where contentment is something you achieve rather than something you access, where peace is a destination rather than your natural state, but it goes deeper than advertising. Our entire economic system depends on dissatisfaction. GDP growth requires increased consumption. Increased consumption requires people who are never quite satisfied with what they have. Think about it. What would happen to the economy if everyone suddenly became content? If people stopped buying things they don't need to impress people they don't like? If the pursuit of happiness was replaced by the practice of happiness, the system would collapse. Which is why the system has a vested interest in keeping you subscribed to external sources of satisfaction. Social media companies have perfected this model. They've gamified human connection, turning friendship into metrics and self-worth into likes. They've created what former Google design ethicist Tristan Harris calls the attention economy, a system where your mental bandwidth is the product being sold to advertisers. But here's what's really insidious. These platforms don't just capture your attention, they shape your desires. The algorithm learns what keeps you scrolling and shows you more of it, gradually training your brain to want things you never knew you wanted and feel dissatisfied with things you used to find perfectly adequate. You're not just using social media is using you. You're not just consuming content, you're being consumed by a system designed to keep you perpetually wanting, perpetually comparing, perpetually paying attention to everything except your own actual experience. Let me paint you two pictures of the same person living in two completely different paradigms. Picture one, the subscription life. You wake up and immediately check your phone. The notifications tell you what you should care about today. The social media feed shows you what you should want, what you should be doing, what you should look like. You go to work not because the work itself fulfills you, but because the paycheck enables your subscriptions. You buy things not because you need them, but because having them makes you feel like the kind of person who has nice things. You go to the gym not because movement feels good, but because you're subscribed to the idea that your body needs to look a certain way. You socialize not because you enjoy the people, but because being social is part of your curated identity. Every experience is filtered through the question, how does this make me look? How does this advance my goals? How does this compare to what others have? You're living, but you're not alive. You're achieving, but you're not satisfied. You're connected, but you're not present. You fall asleep scrolling through other people's highlight reels, feeling vaguely inadequate about your own life, already planning tomorrow's upgrades and improvements and optimizations. Picture two, the natural life. You wake up and take a breath. You notice how your body feels, what the light looks like, what sounds are happening around you. You're present to the simple fact of being alive. You choose your activities based on what genuinely interests you, what aligns with your values, what brings you satisfaction in the doing rather than just the having done. You buy things when you need them, use them fully, and feel grateful for their function. You exercise because movement feels good, socialize because you enjoy connection, work because the activity itself has meaning. You experience what the Japanese call mono no aware, the bittersweet awareness of the impermanence of things. You appreciate what you have while you have it, knowing that everything changes, and somehow this awareness makes everything more precious, not less. You feel successful not when you achieve external benchmarks, but when you're aligned with your own values and purposes. You feel wealthy not when you have a certain amount of money, but when you want what you have. You feel loved not when you're performing perfectly, but when you're being seen and accepted exactly as you are. And here's the remarkable thing, this way of living doesn't cost anything, it doesn't require upgrades, it doesn't need premium features, it's available right now, exactly as you are, with exactly what you have. But accessing it requires something our culture has trained us to avoid, the willingness to be satisfied, the courage to say enough, the radical act of being content with what is while still being open to what might become. Here's something that will blow your mind. Your brain is literally designed to never be satisfied, and understanding this can set you free. Dr. Antonio Damasio's research on consciousness reveals that the human brain has what's called a negativity bias. You're neurologically wired to pay more attention to what's wrong than what's right, more attention to what's missing than what's present, more attention to potential threats than current safety. This made perfect sense when we were hunter-gatherers. The human who noticed the rustling bush might spot a predator and survive. The human who was content just enjoying the sunset might become dinner. But in our modern environment, this same wiring keeps us perpetually dissatisfied. Your brain is constantly scanning for problems to solve, improvements to make, threats to avoid. It's not designed to notice when things are actually okay. Dr. Rick Hansen puts it this way: your brain is like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones. Bad things stick, good things slide right off. This is why you can receive 10 compliments and 1 criticism, and guess which one you'll be thinking about at 3 a.m.? It's not because you're broken or ungrateful. It's because your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do, prioritizing potential problems over present positives. But here's the hopeful part: you can train your brain differently. Neuroscientist Dr. Sarah Lazar's research on meditation shows that just 8 weeks of mindfulness practice literally changes the structure of your brain. The areas associated with stress and reactivity shrink, while the areas associated with attention and emotional regulation grow. You can rewire your brain for contentment, but it requires practice, intention, and a fundamental shift in how you relate to your own experience. The subscription model exploits your brain's natural wiring, keeping you trapped in cycles of seeking and temporary satisfaction. But when you understand how your brain works, you can start working with it instead of against it. You can train your attention to notice what's already working in your life. You can practice gratitude not as a feel-good exercise, but as a literal neurological intervention. You can cultivate what psychologists call savoring, the ability to fully experience and appreciate positive moments as they're happening. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending problems don't exist. This is about balancing your natural negativity bias with intentional positivity practices. It's about giving the good stuff a chance to stick. Because here's what happens when you do this consistently. You start to realize that satisfaction isn't something you have to chase, it's something you can choose to notice. Happiness isn't something you have to earn, it's something you can practice. And once you realize that, every subscription to external happiness starts to seem not just unnecessary, but absurd. Of all the happiness subscriptions, the most expensive might be the comparison package. And the most tragic part, most people don't even realize they're enrolled. Let me tell you about the day Jennifer finally understood what comparison was costing her. Jennifer was scrolling through Instagram, looking at her college friends' European vacation photos, when she suddenly felt that familiar pit in her stomach. The same feeling she got when she saw engagement announcements, promotion celebrations, perfect family photos, or beautiful home tours. But this time, instead of just feeling bad and moving on, Jennifer got curious. She started paying attention to what was actually happening in her mind. First came the automatic thought, I should be traveling more. Then, my life is boring. Then, I'm not adventurous enough. Then, I'm wasting my 20s. And finally, I'm not living my life right. All of this from a single photo of someone else's dinner in Italy. Jennifer realized she was paying a subscription fee every time she looked at someone else's life and found her own lacking. She was paying with her satisfaction, her peace, her ability to appreciate what she actually had. And here's the kicker. The life she was comparing herself to wasn't even real. It was curated, filtered, performed. She was feeling inadequate about her real life compared to someone else's highlight reel. Dr. Leon Festinger's research on social comparison theory shows us that humans naturally evaluate themselves relative to others. This, much like the negativity bias, served an evolutionary purpose. In small tribes, knowing where you stood relative to others was crucial for survival and reproduction. But in our modern world, we're not comparing ourselves to our tribe of 150 people. We're comparing ourselves to the entire internet, to influencers whose job is to look perfect, to celebrities whose photos are professionally edited, to the highlight reels of millions of people we'll never meet. Your brain doesn't know the difference between your actual peer group and the virtual peer group created by social media algorithms. So you end up feeling like you're failing at life because you're not keeping up with standards that literally don't exist in reality. Theodore Roosevelt said, "Comparison is the thief of joy." But it's worse than theft. Theft implies someone took something from you. Comparison makes you voluntarily hand over your satisfaction in exchange for nothing. Just the illusion of knowing where you stand in a competition that doesn't exist. Here's what Jennifer discovered when she cancelled her comparison subscription. Her life didn't get objectively better, but her experience of her life transformed completely. She still had the same apartment, the same job, the same relationships, but suddenly her apartment felt cozy instead of inadequate. Her job felt meaningful instead of embarrassing. Her relationships felt rich instead of lacking. Nothing changed except her reference point. Instead of measuring her life against everyone else's, she started measuring it against her own values, her own growth, her own sense of meaning and purpose. And that's when she realized something profound. She had never been behind. She had never been failing. She had never been inadequate. She had just been measuring herself with the wrong ruler. Let's talk about the most sophisticated scam in human history, the belief that more is always better. Dr. Philip Brickman's research on the hedonic treadmill reveals something that should fundamentally change how you think about happiness. Lottery winners are no happier than non-winners just 2 years after their windfall. People who become paraplegic return to baseline happiness levels within a similar time frame. What this means is that your capacity for happiness has almost nothing to do with your external circumstances and everything to do with your internal reference point. But the subscription model of happiness is built on convincing you of the opposite. It's built on the promise that the next upgrade will be different, that more money, better relationships, a nicer house, a fitter body, a more impressive job will finally provide lasting satisfaction. Let me tell you about David, a client who discovered this the hard way. David spent 10 years climbing the corporate ladder, sacrificing relationships, health, and peace of mind for the promise that success would eventually make him happy. When he finally got the executive position he'd been chasing, the corner office, the six-figure salary, the respect of his peers, he felt nothing. Well, not nothing. He felt tired, stressed, hollow, like he'd been sold a dream that turned out to be someone else's nightmare. "I thought I was playing the game wrong," David told me. But then I realized the game itself was rigged. The goalposts kept moving. Every achievement just revealed new inadequacies. Every upgrade just showed me what I still didn't have. David had discovered what philosophers call the hedonic treadmill, but what we might more accurately call the happiness hamster wheel. The faster you run, the more exhausted you get, but you never actually get anywhere. But here's where David's story gets interesting. Instead of upgrading to an even more demanding position, instead of subscribing to even more expensive happiness services, David did something radical. He cancelled his subscriptions, not all at once, not dramatically, but systematically, consciously, intentionally. He started paying attention to what actually brought him satisfaction versus what he thought should bring him satisfaction. He discovered that his happiest moments weren't in the boardroom closing deals, but in his garden growing tomatoes. Not at networking events building his brand, but at home having dinner with his family. Not achieving his goals, but being present to his life. David learned to distinguish between pleasure and happiness, between excitement and contentment, between getting what he wanted and wanting what he had. And slowly, gradually, beautifully, he began to access the free version of happiness that had been available all along. Here's something most people don't realize. The subscription model of happiness has turned us into addicts, not to substances, but to something more subtle and more dangerous, the addiction to becoming. You're addicted to the next version of yourself, the version that will finally have it all figured out, the version that will be confident, successful, attractive, wise, peaceful, loved. The version that will finally deserve happiness. But here's the cruel irony. The more you focus on becoming that future version of yourself, the less capable you become of being satisfied with the current version. You're always one upgrade away from okayness, always one achievement away from self-acceptance, always one improvement away from enough. Dr. Kristin Neff's research on self-compassion reveals something startling. People who constantly try to improve themselves actually improve less than people who accept themselves as they are. Why? Because self-acceptance provides the psychological safety necessary for growth, while self-rejection creates the anxiety that inhibits it. You can't hate yourself into a version of yourself you love. You can't criticize yourself into confidence. You can't shame yourself into worthiness, but the subscription model depends on you believing that you can. It depends on keeping you in a state of dissatisfaction with who you are right now, so you'll keep paying for who you might become. Think about the self-help industry. Billions of dollars spent annually on books, courses, seminars, and programs promising to help you become better. And yet anxiety and depression rates continue to climb. Satisfaction levels continue to decline. The happier we're supposed to be getting, the more miserable we actually become. This isn't because self-improvement is bad. Growth, learning, and development are beautiful aspects of human life. The problem is when improvement becomes compulsive. When growth becomes about escaping yourself rather than expressing yourself. When development becomes about fixing what's wrong rather than cultivating what's already right. You know, the addiction to becoming keeps you trapped in this perpetual state of not there yet. And as long as you're not there yet, well, you're a perfect customer for happiness subscriptions. But what if there isn't actually a place you arrive at? What if there is, in fact, here? What if, honestly, the person you're trying so hard to become is just the person you already are, minus the story that you're not enough as you are? Ram Dass, the spiritual teacher, popularized the phrase, "be here now." But, perhaps more accurately, it should be who now. Because the who you are beneath all the subscriptions, beneath all the programming, beneath all the stories about who you should become, that who is already here, that who has always been here. You've just been, too busy becoming to notice. So, how do you actually cancel these happiness subscriptions? And how do you unsubscribe from the endless cycle of seeking satisfaction outside yourself? Well, it starts with a fundamental shift in your relationship to desire itself. Step 1, audit your current subscriptions. It's time to get, brutally honest about what you're currently subscribed to. What are you constantly seeking? What do you believe, deep down, will make you happy? What are you always trying to change, improve, or acquire? Jot them down, all of them. The obvious ones, and, the subtle ones too. Both the material desires and the emotional ones. The goals, the fantasies, and those if-only scenarios. Look at this list not with judgment, but with curiosity. These subscriptions served a purpose. They gave you something to hope for, something to work toward, something to organize your life around. But now ask yourself, are they still serving you, or are you serving them? Step 2. Calculate the true cost. For each subscription, ask yourself, what is this actually costing me? Not just in money, but in time, energy, peace of mind, and present moment awareness. That career goal that's supposed to make you feel successful. How much anxiety is it generating? How much of your current life are you sacrificing for a future that honestly may never arrive? How much presence are you trading for planning? That relationship standard you're holding yourself to, how much self-judgment is it creating? How much of your natural affection are you withholding because it doesn't match your idea of how love should look? The real cost of happiness subscriptions isn't just what you pay, it's what you stop receiving. Every moment you spend seeking satisfaction elsewhere is a moment you're not available to the satisfaction that's already here. Step 3, practice the art of enough. This might be perhaps the most radical practice in our culture, learning to be satisfied with what you have while remaining open to what might come. Start small. Practice saying, this is enough, about things that are actually enough. Your morning coffee, A conversation with a friend, a sunset, a good book, a comfortable bed. Notice how your mind, almost automatically, wants to upgrade even perfect experiences. The beautiful sunset would be better if you were somewhere more exotic. The good conversation would be better if it were with someone more impressive. The comfortable bed would be better if it were in a nicer house. This is your subscription programming running in the background. Notice it, name it. But, don't follow it. Instead, practice what Buddhists call mudita, appreciative joy. The ability to be happy about what's good without needing it to be better. Step 4. Distinguish between preferences and requirements. You can want things without being addicted to getting them. You can have preferences without making your happiness dependent on those preferences being met. The subscription model turns every preference into a requirement, every want into a need, every desire into a desperate craving that must be satisfied for you to be okay. But you can train yourself to hold desires lightly, to prefer certain outcomes while being genuinely okay with whatever actually happens. This is what the Stoics called preferred indifference, things you naturally prefer but don't require for your well-being. You can want a promotion while being genuinely content if you don't get it. You can hope for good weather while being truly fine with rain. Step 5. Cultivate present moment appreciation. The antidote to subscription-based happiness is presence-based happiness. And presence isn't something you achieve, it's something you practice. Start paying attention to what's actually happening right now, instead of what you think should be happening. Notice what you're experiencing instead of what you're lacking. Feel what's available instead of what's absent. This isn't about gratitude practices or positive thinking. This is about the simple recognition that life is happening now, not in the improved version of now that you're trying to create. The Zen teacher Jon Kabat-Zinn says, wherever you go, there you are. But the subscription model trains you to believe, wherever you are, you should be somewhere else. When you stop believing that lie, everything changes. Let me tell you about the most dangerous economic principle you've never heard of: the diminishing marginal utility of everything. Economics teaches us that the more you have of something, the less additional satisfaction each new unit provides. The first slice of pizza brings tremendous joy, the second slice is pretty good, the third is okay, the fourth makes you sick, but somehow we've convinced ourselves that this principle doesn't apply to the things we really want. We think that more money will keep making us happier indefinitely. That more status will keep feeling good forever. That more possessions will continue to satisfy us endlessly. Research by Dr. Tim Kasser shows exactly the opposite. Not only do material gains provide diminishing returns, they actually create what he calls materialistic treadmill syndrome. The more you get, the more you need to get the same level of satisfaction. It's like developing a tolerance to a drug. You need bigger hits to feel the same high, except the drug is external validation, and the tolerance is to your own life. But here's where it gets really interesting. The economics of enough work in reverse. Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky's research reveals that people who practice gratitude, who focus on what they have rather than what they lack, actually experience what she calls increasing marginal utility. The more they appreciate what they already have, the more satisfaction they derive from it. Your morning coffee becomes more delicious when you're not taking it for granted. Your relationships become more fulfilling when you're not comparing them to some ideal. Your work becomes more meaningful when you're not using it just as a stepping stone to something else. This is the free market of contentment. No subscription required, no premium features needed, just the radical act of paying attention to what's already paid for. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop needing more, you often end up with more. When you stop chasing success, you often become more successful. When you stop demanding love, you often become more lovable. Not because the universe rewards non-attachment, but because you're finally available to receive what's been there all along. One of the hardest parts about canceling your happiness subscriptions isn't the internal work, it's the social pressure to keep paying. We live in a culture that, well, worships growth, achievement, and improvement. Saying I'm satisfied with what I have is often interpreted as giving up. Being content is seen as settling. Choosing presence over progress is viewed as laziness. Your family might not understand why you're not pushing for that promotion. Your friends might be confused about why you're not trying to upgrade your lifestyle. Your social media followers might wonder why you're not sharing more impressive updates about your life. This is because most people are still subscribed. They're still buying into the myth that happiness is something you earn, achieve, or acquire. And when someone opts out of that system, it threatens their investment in it. But here's what you need to understand. Other people's discomfort with your contentment is not your problem to solve. Their need for you to be as restless as they are is not your responsibility to fulfill. You don't owe anyone your dissatisfaction. You don't owe anyone your anxiety about not being enough. You don't owe anyone your participation in the collective delusion that happiness is always one purchase, one achievement, one upgrade away. Dr. Brené Brown's research on vulnerability shows that when we stop performing who we think we should be and start being who we actually are, we give others permission to do the same. Your contentment isn't selfish, it's revolutionary. Every person who chooses satisfaction over striving, presence over progress, being over becoming, creates a crack in the matrix of collective dissatisfaction. You become living proof that the subscription model is optional. That happiness is available right now, exactly as you are, exactly where you are, with exactly what you have. And that's the most subversive act possible in a culture built on the promise that you're not enough yet. Here's something beautiful that happens when you cancel your happiness subscriptions. You start earning compound interest on your contentment. Every moment you choose to be satisfied with what is rather than frustrated by what isn't, you're making a deposit in your happiness account. And unlike external achievements which depreciate over time, internal satisfaction actually appreciates. Think about it. That promotion you got 3 years ago probably doesn't give you much of a happiness boost anymore. Like, so that car you were excited to buy is now just transportation. And that relationship milestone that felt so important at the time is now just part of your normal life. But contentment works differently. The more you practice being satisfied, the easier it becomes. The more you choose presence, the more natural it feels. The more you appreciate what you have, the more there is to appreciate. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's research on positive emotions shows that happiness creates what she calls an upward spiral. Unlike negative emotions, which narrow your focus and limit your options, positive emotions broaden your awareness and build psychological resources. When you're content, you're more creative. When you're present, you're more connected. When you're satisfied, you're more generous. When you're enough, you have more to offer others. This is why people who have cancelled their happiness subscriptions often seem to have more energy, deeper relationships, and greater resilience. They're not spending their psychological resources on an endless pursuit of satisfaction. They're investing them in actually living. And here's the kicker. When you stop needing life to be different than it is, life often becomes more beautiful than you imagined it could be. Not because external circumstances improve, but because your capacity to receive beauty, to appreciate goodness, to notice magic expands exponentially. You start seeing synchronicities you were too busy to notice. You start having conversations you were too distracted to appreciate. You start experiencing moments you were too focused on the future to receive. This is the compound interest of contentment. Every moment you choose to be here rather than somewhere else, you're earning a return that can never be taken away, can never depreciate, and never needs to be upgraded. Let me tell you about the moment Jessica finally understood what freedom actually means. Jessica had been a premium subscriber to every happiness service available. She was the friend who always had her life together, the employee who always exceeded expectations, the daughter who always made her parents proud. But she was exhausted, bone deep, soul tired, can't get out of bed on Sunday, exhausted. The breaking point came during what should have been the happiest moment of her life. She had just gotten the job she'd been working toward for 5 years, in the city she'd always dreamed of living in, with a salary that would finally allow her to live the life she'd been planning. And she felt nothing. Well, not nothing. She felt terrified. Terrified that she still wasn't happy, terrified that maybe she never would be, terrified that she'd spent 5 years climbing a ladder that was leaning against the wrong wall. That night, Jessica did something she hadn't done in years. She cancelled her plans, turned off her phone, and just sat with herself. No improvement project, no optimization strategy, no plan for becoming better. Just being, just breathing, just noticing what it felt like to exist without trying to become anything. And in that stillness, something shifted. She realized that the person she'd been trying to become, successful, impressive, admirable, that person was already here. She had achieved everything she thought would make her happy. The problem wasn't that she hadn't arrived. The problem was that she'd forgotten how to be satisfied with arrival. She had confused achievement with fulfillment. She had mistaken doing with being. She had traded her natural contentment for the promise of earned happiness. But sitting there in her expensive apartment, with her impressive job in her dream city, Jessica made a radical decision. She chose to be enough. Not because she had achieved enough, but because enough is not an achievement. It's a choice. She chose to be satisfied. Not because her circumstances were perfect, but because satisfaction is not a response to perfect circumstances. It's a way of relating to whatever circumstances you have. She chose to be happy. Not because everything in her life was happy, but because happiness is not the absence of problems. It's the presence of peace with what is. That was the moment Jessica cancelled all her subscriptions and discovered she'd been paying for something that was always free. When you cancel your happiness subscriptions, when you choose contentment over consumption, satisfaction over striving, being over becoming, something remarkable happens that extends far beyond yourself. You become contagious. But instead of spreading dissatisfaction, comparison, and restlessness, you start spreading something else, peace. Your children, if you have them, start learning that their worth isn't tied to their performance. Your friends start feeling less pressure to impress you and more permission to be authentic around you. Your colleagues start noticing that success doesn't have to come at the cost of sanity. You become living proof that it's possible to be happy without having everything, to be successful without sacrificing everything, to be enough without doing everything. Dr. Christakis and Fowler's research on social networks shows that happiness spreads through social connections up to 3 degrees of separation. Your contentment doesn't just affect you, it affects your friends' friends, and your friends' friends. When you stop participating in the cultural obsession with more, better, faster, you create space for others to question their own subscriptions. When you model satisfaction, you give others permission to be satisfied too. This is how cultural change happens, not through top-down mandates or mass movements, but through individuals who choose to live differently, through people who refuse to buy into collective delusions, through human beings who dare to be content in a culture that profits from their discontent. Every person who cancels their happiness subscriptions makes it easier for the next person to do the same. Every individual who chooses presence over productivity creates a little crack in the matrix of cultural conditioning. You might think your personal choice to be satisfied doesn't matter much in the grand scheme of things, but satisfaction is rebellion, contentment is revolution. Being enough in a culture that insists you're not enough yet is honestly one of the most radical acts possible. You're not just changing your own life, you're changing the conversation about what it means to live well. You're modeling a different way of being human. You're proving that the subscription model of happiness is, well, optional. And maybe, just maybe, you're helping to create a world where future generations won't have to pay for peace of mind, where satisfaction won't be a luxury item, where happiness won't be a subscription service, where being enough will be enough. As we reach the end of this journey together, I want to leave you with the most important cancellation of all, the subscription that underlies all the others, the one that, when cancelled, makes all the other cancellations possible. It's your subscription to the story that you're not okay as you are. Every happiness subscription you've ever paid for has been built on this fundamental premise that your natural state is inadequate, that who you are right now, exactly as you are, with exactly what you have, is somehow not enough. But what if that's not true? What if the premise itself is flawed? What if you were born enough? What if you've been enough every day since? What if all the achievements and improvements and upgrades haven't made you more enough? They've just temporarily convinced you to forget that you were already enough. This isn't about settling or giving up or becoming complacent. This is about recognizing the difference between improvement that comes from self-love and improvement that comes from self-rejection. Between growth that's an expression of who you are and growth that's an escape from who you are. When you truly understand that you're already enough, two beautiful things happen. First, you stop desperately grasping for external validation. You can receive compliments without needing them. You can handle criticism without being devastated by it. You can pursue goals without making your worth dependent on achieving them. Second, you paradoxically become more capable of genuine growth, because you're no longer growing from desperation, but from curiosity. Not from inadequacy, but from abundance. Not from what's wrong with you, but from what's possible for you. The deepest spiritual teachings, the most profound psychological insights, the most liberating philosophical truths, all point to the same recognition. You are not a problem to be solved. You are not a project to be completed. You are not a subscription that needs constant upgrades. You are a human being having a human experience, and that in itself is enough. So here's your final assignment, your last subscription to cancel. Stop believing that happiness is something you have to earn, achieve, or acquire. Stop believing that satisfaction is something you get when your life finally looks a certain way. Stop believing that you'll be enough when you've done enough, had enough, become enough. Start believing what has always been true, that happiness is your natural state when you're not talking yourself out of it. That satisfaction is available right now when you stop requiring life to be different than it is, that you are enough exactly as you are, exactly where you are, exactly with what you have. This isn't a belief you have to work up to. It's a truth you have to stop working against. The subscription model of happiness has convinced you that contentment is something you buy, but contentment is something you are when you stop buying into the lie that you're not already whole. Your happiness was never for sale because it was never yours to lose. The subscription has been cancelled. Welcome to the free version. Welcome home.